very exciting.
All right, just so, can everybody hear me?
Mm-hmm.
All right, the note taker now be taking notes, so everyone's aware. Probably still need to wait a little while. I just wanted to make sure that it connected in time, and my trial of Google One or whatever is done, so we are limited to the hour. Give it like 2 more minutes. So the conditional rights, does that just give us possibly more control on like how, like the order or like what particular use cases does that serve the most, I guess?
You don't have to worry about clobbering another writer, so you can be a little more fast and loose with
Okay. Cool. So if you would, the condition or whatever would just be like you would effectively have a lock on a portion or something like that, and if that lock is there, or if some sort of thing is there that basically says like I'm writing in this location, you're writing in that location, there won't be any overlap, or how does that? I
mean, I have no idea what the actual implementation is, but I mean, theoretically, this means that you can do a move or something like that that only succeeds if the file isn't there already.
Okay. You can do atomic.
Theoretically, it's like the file tree has a lock on every path, basically, or at least it could theoretically could. So you could basically do something there.
Okay. Isn't this so? I don't know. I feel like anytime we've seen the files, something like this implemented in the file system, it's like it usually doesn't work well.
Are we talking about put if absent?
Yeah, in S3.
Oh yeah. I mean, just in time for everyone to care about multi-statement transactions.
Yeah.
All right. Should we get to start?
Yeah, I think we're 5 minutes in. Go for it.
All right. Sorry. I apologize in advance, everyone. My brain doesn't appear to be working normally today, so just bear with me. I might say some strange things. Have been all morning. All right. Starting off with highlights. So a couple of Flink things to start off with. One, Stephen added support for the Flink 120, copied that over. So really great to see, support for Flink rolling forward. And the one that I'm super excited about is the support for range distribution. So one of the biggest things that, hey Steve, can you mute? We're hearing a lot of background noise. Thank you. One of the challenges when writing data out of Flink is the ability to actually group and distribute data with a range distribution, much like when you're sorting across files in Spark. So it should be really great to see that happen. That'll allow Flink applications to do a much better job distributing data so to take advantage of column statistics and further filtering at read time. So I'm super excited about that. Thank you, Stephen, Peter, and Gong for getting that done. It's been, I know a very big effort. So really well done. I want to thank Peter for driving through the dropping support for Java 8. That's really nice. What version are we actually targeting now? 11? Is that correct? All right, let's get on some of those Java 11 features. I think all the good stuff comes in 17, right? I don't know. anyway, good to be moving forward. Thanks for facilitating that conversation in the community. Then we've got a couple of things for the V3 format. So a big thanks to Russell for getting all of the metadata classes copied over and in. This is everything that we use to basically all the mechanics in Java for writing different versions of metadata based on the table version. So we needed to basically fork the V2 stuff, move it over to V3 so we can make changes. I was very, happy to see that when I was making changes earlier this week that I need to go through and do that. So thanks to Russell. The other thing is we added some metadata upgrade testing. So thanks, Jonathan, for working on that. That's really good stuff to get into. Thanks to Amog for implementing recovery operations for S3. So this is part of the ongoing work to create a repair table action and procedure. So you should just be able to run a distributed action that crawls the entire metadata tree and does things like look for files that are missing from S3 or other file IO implementations, and if possible, recovers them. So this is something that is going to help a lot of people who have bucket policies that inadvertently go and delete their data or things like that. So, well, wait, does bucket policy actually use a delete marker? Oh, it might not.
It can.
We'll figure it out. It can? Okay. Good. In any case, like any table corruption, having a repair table operation is really nice. Thanks to Naveen for removing deprecated APIs for the 1.7 release. And also thanks to the folks over at Apple, Huaxin and Karapaya, for getting support for exposing our column stats into Spark. That's going to really help Spark make better choices about plans and things like that. So that's awesome. Thank you, guys. On the Rust side, I will hand it off to hopefully Renji, because he did all of the highlights. Is Renji here? No. All right. Renji's not here. But thank you so much, Renji, for submitting the highlights. Really great to see. First of all, the 0.3 release is out. So thank you to Xuanwo for being our release manager and pushing that forward. There is a SQL catalog contribution from Ryan. Ryan, I thought it was Ryan Callum. This says Callum Ryan. I might be wrong. But thank you. That is really cool to start working on. Manifest list caching. Thank you, Scott, and early support for timestamp nanoseconds. So thanks, Timothy. And then on the PyIceberg side, I want to highlight, thanks to Sung for getting the 0.7.1 release out. So really great to see those releases. Oh, that reminds me, if you're a release manager, make sure you ping Faco or I to register the releases in the release manager tool the ASF has. It helps us keep track of releases, and I have definitely missed a couple of these. So hopefully, Faco, you can help keep an eye on this as well. All right, and let's talk about releases that are upcoming. So I'll hand it over to, is Peter or Carl here for 1.6.1? No, okay, well, I think the only update on 1.6.1 is that there's an ongoing vote thread. So please go check that out and vote. I believe that the only patch in it, because we didn't make it with the Avro update, is to reduce memory consumption in Trino. So if you have time, please go and take a look at that release. And then I'll hand it off to Russell for 1.7.
Sure. Hey, everybody. So right now, we're basically pushing ahead all of our proposals for all the things that we've been saying on the mailing list that we want to get into 1.7 and spec v3. As you've seen above, we have the initial v3 metadata stuff cooked in, but that is leaving out all the implementations for everything else, including default values, timestamps, and all the other stuff. And as you'll see below, we have a bunch of specs and other larger movements that are still in progress. If you have anything else that you're trying to line up, please get in touch with me. We'll set up a board probably when I get back from the LDB, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. Thank you. One thing that I would highlight here is that default value support for Parquet and ORC are currently not covered. We have a PR for default value support being added to Avro, and we're pretty close on that implementation. But if you'd like to contribute ORC or Parquet support for default values, that would be awesome. So thank you, everyone. All right, let's hop to discussion topics, and I'll hand it back to Russell again for row lineage.
Yeah, hi. So this one, I just wanted everyone, if you wanted to take a look at this, we basically have a proposal up where we have a variety of options, all of which I think are kind of reasonable. We just kind of need to wheedle that down to what exactly we want to implement. I'm hoping we can get some consensus in the community on exactly which options we want to go forward with. Basically, the idea is we want to identify every single row that gets written into an Iceberg table, and then keep track of that identifier as we change those rows in the future. So basically, for any row, you can not only determine basically when it was made, but when it was last changed or if it was ever changed. So with that, you can basically build out CDC features and things like that. So please take a look at that spec just to get an idea on how we're going to, various ways we're going to do that. Basically, all of the proposals involve a minimal amount of changing to a write path and basically inheriting these values through until the rows are changed. Check out the specs to kind of see more information on how that works. But yeah, I just want to draw everyone's attention there because I'm hoping we can make a decision relatively soon, and I can write up some spec changes, and then we can go on to implementation.
That sounds good to me. Do you have a early preference for which options you're thinking are the best ones?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm thinking, I think I've been won over to the global identifier camp. So if you'll see there's basically two fields that we need to determine. One is the row identifier, and for that we have two big options. Basically, one is doing it at a snapshot level, and one is basically doing a global identifier where every single row, regardless of where it is, has a single number that identifies it. So that is the same thing that's happening right now in Delta. I think snapshot level does give you less chance of other people ruining your ordering, but if everyone follows the spec, both should be safe. And then the other thing that we have to choose for is actual versioning of the row. So how do you identify that a row has been changed? I think we're pretty much settled that one of those components is going to be the sequence number of the last commit to change that row. The only question is, do we want to include any additional information? And I've heard, so some of the reasons that I have other options there is I've heard internally inside of the Snowflake branch that they have some of these other fields. And I'm trying to get information from anyone on if those are used for other optimizations, and if so, would we want to be able to do similar things in Iceberg, or if they're just vestigial of some other decisions. But basically, that's kind of where we're at.
Awesome. I also have one more question on this, which is do we actually need the basically commit number, or whatever that is, to be sequential, or is there value in it being sequential? And the reason why I would, because we've got sequence number, which is sequential, and then we also have snapshot ID, which can be just generated pre-commit and written directly into all of the files. So my argument for snapshot ID would just be that we can more easily embed it in the files and not use a inheritance scheme.
Don't we have to still do inheritance there? Otherwise, every retry requires us to redo the whole snapshot. Or
Well, so this would just be you would be able to generate a snapshot ID and then commit with a particular snapshot ID. So we would just add to like merging snapshot producer something that is, hey, set this as my snapshot ID. That would also give us the ability when doing certain other operations like a cherry pick to preserve snapshot IDs, which is not great. Actually, we should not do that.
I was going to say, can't we?
With the same snapshot ID. That's a terrible idea. But like,
we can already do that mapping though with the sequence number, can't we? Like, if you have all the snapshots, you can do that map back as well.
yes, you can. Yeah, it would be easier and less like inheritance work to like not inherit down to the data file level. So like I have no problem doing the inheritance work. We're already going to be inheriting somehow, but I'm wondering if that would make it easier for implementations to get this correct.
Yeah, that's a fair thing to think about. Yeah, let's take that offline. I don't know if we want to discuss that right now. That's a bit more of a technical thing. We gotta walk through all the other cases. Should we just go to my next element?
Please.
Yeah, cool. So next thing is discussion. I don't know if everyone's been following, but basically we have, I think, consensus between at least a good part of the Spark community and the Iceberg community to move the variant type spec out of the Spark project and into Parquet. There's an ongoing email thread in the Spark community right there, which I encourage you to comment on and support, because I think having the spec inside of Parquet makes it much easier for us to actually comply with the spec and always be compatible with other engines that are reading it. So please support that if you want to, and if you don't support it, also let your feelings be known, because this is an open source community and you should do that.
Awesome. And thanks for following up on that discussion. I'm really hoping that we can get back to progress on the technical side.
Yeah. I'm wondering how can we have a consensus on that.
I think
we're saying like it's on Arrow and on Parquet, right? How can we get a consensus?
So I think that's kind of difficult. Part of it, so yeah, the background for anyone here is that we were looking at this and talking to the folks that submitted the variant spec in the Spark community, and basically saying like, where is the best place to maintain this across communities. And I think those of us talking from most people involved in the Iceberg side discussions are cool with either Iceberg or Parquet. It sounds like the Spark community doesn't, hopefully, I don't think, mind moving to a more neutral location. I was actually pretty surprised about the discussion around moving it to Arrow, because I don't really know that it makes sense. So to me it was sorry. I don't really understand the argument for moving it to Arrow, because that wasn't really one of the suggested alternatives in the start. So I kind of get that there's a argument there because it's an in-memory model, but it kind of felt like people saying, hey, that should move to our community, which I suppose was kind of what we were doing with Iceberg as well. So I don't know. It's kind of hard for us to build a consensus around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we basically just make sure this thread gets enough support, because as long as we're able to move it out of Spark, I think we're okay on the Parquet side to get it in. On this note, we are probably, I think as a community, we're basically confirmed that this is what we want to go with. So we should probably start talking about spec changes for metadata handling for variant type, because that's something that won't be in the Parquet spec or whatever. So we should do a little discussion of how we're going to handle that. I know Yufe and I talked about this for a while yesterday, and I think there's some pretty simple ways we can do this, even for shredding, but we should start working on that now that we know that this is going to be in a place that we can reference. I do feel bad that, like, I want to do a PR spec that says we're going to adopt this, but I don't know where we would link to. So
I actually added variant type in my my type promotion PR. I sort of, left that blank.
Yeah.
I think it just points to parquet.apache.org right now. But I did start some of the work there because I wanted to include, type promotion from anything to variant, and start getting some of that wording into the community just to discuss.
Yeah, it sounds like the solution with ICE. We should probably just move to talking about that after we do row level deletes, rather than skipping row level deletes.
Yeah, I agree. Row level deletes is probably the next step. So yes, I wish I had a better idea of how we can build consensus around this, but it seems like most of the people involved up to this point are in favor of Parquet, and both the people that created and submitted it to Spark. I think we have the Spark community on board. The Parquet community will almost certainly be. So hopefully we can decide and move forward, and then figure out how to work with the Arrow community smoothly as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So yeah, let's move on to row level deletes. I believe Anton is here. I don't see him. Oh, there you go. Too many tiles. So yes, Anton's been doing work on improvements to row level deletes. So I'll hand it off to him.
Yeah, I think I've talked to some of the members of the community already, but I worked on a proposal to kind of improve position deletes in V3 based on the lessons that we've learned, like deploying the current approach at scale. That gave us a lot of valuable insights and some of the decisions that maybe we should not have made or whatnot. And also, I went through all of the proposals that we had before about what we want to do differently, but back then we didn't have answers to many questions, and hopefully my proposal would answer them. So for instance, we know that there are a few shortcomings in the existing implementation. In particular, we choose between partition granularity and file granularity. With partition granularity, you have fewer files in disk, but you have false positives, and it's just it's harder to work with those deletes at the metadata level and in the engine. Or you have file scope deletes, which are really targeted. They target a specific data file, and you can tell that, but it produces a ton of tiny files on disk as well, and then you need a more aggressive compaction. We also know that we have overhead in readers and writers, because in-memory representation is different from the on-disk representation, and there have been multiple talks about persisting rowing bitmaps on disk as well. So I've done a bunch of benchmarks to see where we are, what it means for the disk footprint, what it means for the write performance, what it means for the read performance, and whatnot. And also, we do not require strict one-to-one mapping right now between position deletes and data files. You can have multiple delete files that apply to the same data file. And I think based on what we've seen in the past, wasn't the best idea, because these tables never maintained, and the performance of the read and write operations degrade quicker than we want them. So I have a couple of options how to make that maintenance required and be part of the actual execution as well, so that you have at most one position delete file per data file. So those are just some of the points. I'm going to send out the doc later today.
Sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, I have seen an early version of the doc, and I'm pretty excited about this work because it fixes a lot of those issues and that we've seen over the years with the position deletes. So like synchronously maintaining those delete files, I think is really good. Splitting the metadata for a file and tracking the deletes at a file level in metadata, but rolling those up to larger files is a really nice compromise for actually maintaining things and not exploding like expiration operations. And I was actually talking to, I think, Russell about this yesterday. It helps us quite a bit with CDC and like change logs coming out of tables as well. So I think this is a really good step forward for our row level deletes. We would be introducing, just to highlight some things, a couple of somewhat controversial changes that we should think through. For one, it would be requiring that from V3 forward, deletes are maintained synchronously. So it wouldn't prevent you from having multiple delete files in the table, but it would mandate that if you write a delete, you need to compact all of the deletes from previous versions. So that is really going to help us keep deletes clean, because one of the biggest problems was stacking up hundreds or thousands of delete files per data file by simply not maintaining deletes. I think this is going to be good overall, but please do take a close look at it if you're interested in this area.
Yeah, and I'll also seeking feedback. So a lot of the text is based on some of the things we do in Spark, and I'm giving kind of examples how like the new solution can work there. But I'm also we'll meet with other query engines to see like how they feel about these changes and what kind of feedback they have. So if you use position deletes, please like comment on the doc, look into it, and like if you feel that something is not right, then just let us know.
Cool, thanks, Anton. All right, next I wanted to briefly mention type promotion. There were quite a few comments, and there's a big thread on this on the dev list. So I wanted to briefly go over the issue and sort of where I'm thinking for splitting down the middle and getting some things done and putting off other work. So Micah from Google and pointed out when we were talking about type promotion that our stats don't actually contain type information for what type was written to a data file metadata when we wrote the data file. Now this has always been fine because we've just not needed anything more granular. We only have basically two type promotions that mean the encoding to bytes actually changes. And in both cases, we have either a 4-byte value or an 8-byte value. So we were able to detect really easily whether it was promoted or not. However, if we're looking at something like string conversions or date and time conversions, even something as simple as allowing both float and int to be promoted to double, then we have when you see the type is double and you have a 4-byte value, if we were to allow both int and float, you wouldn't know whether the original value was an int or the original value was a float. So there are a few options for taking care of this. One, we could change the metadata representation in V3 for all of these things, which may be viable. I'm looking into this and seeing if it is a good thing to do in preparation for V4. But it is, no matter what, going to be a lot more difficult and may actually delay V3, which, considering we have timestamp nanos coming out, We really want to get variant support. We really want row lineage and these row level delete updates. In addition, like hopefully we're going to get geo in there. I think that it probably makes more sense to cut the scope of things that we're considering for type promotion rather than push ahead with a, try to rush through a change to how we track deletes, or sorry, how we track column stats. So the sort of middle road that I wanted to propose was, instead of doing a bunch of type promotions that are nice but not really necessary for the use cases that we're targeting, try and cut back to just some of the simpler ones that can be determined uniquely by the number of bytes in the stats. So if everyone is okay with that idea, I think that makes it a whole lot easier for us to get some type promotions, although not all, into V3. The one area that is kind of sticky here is the int and long promotion to string, because you can have 4-byte strings, or you can have 4-byte ints, or same thing with 8 bytes. And there, our solution is to basically check whether both lower and upper bound values are 4 bytes or 8 bytes, because that would be the case if you had promoted from int or long. And we think that it's very unlikely, for strings at least, to have the same number of bytes for both the lower and upper bounds, right? Maybe if you had like a categorical variable that happened to have a lower bound that's 4 bytes and an upper bound that's 4 bytes, but in that case, you may not actually be getting much value out of manifest level column stats anyway. So we think that it's a pretty good compromise to get this out there, just discarding stats if both the lower and upper bounds have either 4 or 8 bytes.
What about truncated bounds though? Like, if, for example, you have 6. Oh, yeah, I mean that's handles. Yeah, never mind.
Yeah, the default for truncation, I think where Anton was going, is 16 bytes or 16 characters. So it is unlikely that people are changing that truncation value. And I think in that case, we would actually, if you truncate to 8 or 4 bytes, you'd probably discard the stats in those cases. So that's another one that, if the community or if people feel strongly that that's not a good solution, we can drop the int and long promotion to string. I think that that's the main question moving forward, to continue to try and get as much as we can in V3 without necessarily doing a ton of work and delaying the release. So there is a, from the dev list discussion thread, which I don't have linked here, there is a PR out that goes over the changes to the spec. It also adds unknown and variant types, just to make sure that we have some of that, since those were used in the type promotion things. So please go check that out, and we can we can discuss on that thread more. All right, we've got another one: proposal to add a UI to Iceberg. Don't know who that was.
That's me, Rakesh. Okay, so yeah, that's what it is. Basically, just want to get a feel of what do you think if we should add a UI where you can visualize all the namespaces, tables properties, partitions, snapshots, and whatnot, right? All the metadata, including the sample data by each partition. So we have a prototype. I linked it in the GitHub issue, the proposal, where we found it quite useful, because people would usually want to know, what a table is, what it contains, or what is the properties. what is the schema of the table and all that details without querying anything, right? So that's the idea. Just want to get a feel of what the community thinks, if that should be a separate project as a UI for Iceberg.
Did we just lose it? Oh, sorry. My gut reaction to this is probably it should stay a separate project, just because I don't know if it's something that we want to maintain indefinitely inside of the project itself. But I'm totally open if other folks have ideas on that, because I mean, we basically say all of these APIs exist, but we don't actually provide a concise tool for actually looking at that information.
Well, we do have the CLI.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would fall back to is, historically we've shied away from runtime as part of the project, and this kind of borders on that to some extent. Is it a one-off little tool to just do like ad hoc exploratory, or is it something that you would deploy to actually navigate and run as part of an operational system? It feels like it kind of leads into the latter.
And actually, I would love to know, Fako, if you have thoughts on this, because I would assume since it's a PyIceberg-based solution, we would incorporate it into that if we were going to incorporate it into the project.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it right now. It looks really, really nice. So thanks for building this. It's really cool. Yeah, for me the question is like, what's the value that we gain like by adding this to the project itself? Yeah, it's another. It's a different use case, I would say. So yeah, it's like another dimension to PyIceberg, which I don't think was not like the initial goal of PyIceberg. So the question is like, is there like a strong incentive to add this, or is it, or should we keep it separately? Because yeah, right now it's like one Streamlit app, but I can also see like that it can grow quite big, and then yeah, we have like quite a big of UI component in PyIceberg that we also have to develop and maintain. Yeah, next to the more core stuff, I would say. Ryan?
Yeah, I think I agree that like maybe it makes more sense to have as like or build out maybe some sort of a description, or obviously there is already kind of a description, but then think about like, is there maybe a place where we could put on Trino, for instance, there's like the resources page where you can go through and find like all the community projects. So I think like having those visible or viewable or and discoverable, I guess I should say, it would be kind of a cool way to showcase it through Iceberg channels, but then like still say this is like maintained in a community sense. This is and to me that does two things. It makes it discoverable for people who need a tool like this. But then it also encourages other people in the community to build these tools. And so I think that is something that we're probably lacking in the community sense, is that, yeah, it's always possible to, but I think until we actually have like a nice list of community built tools and maybe even build some, portions of the documentation that reference this, it'd be something that nobody would really think to do necessarily on their own. But when they feel like they're part of the community, then it becomes more possible. So, Yufei?
Yeah, I would suggest like for the same order as the Rust cataloging reference implementation, right? We can put them into separate projects, not necessarily within under the Iceberg project. So that for this UI, I think it's eventually will connect to some catalogs. By this one, which is a very nice one, backed by the PyIceberg, can connect to the different, mainly the REST catalogs, potentially go to the Hive catalog as well. Which I think it's best to have these separate projects which can connect to different catalogs. And Iceberg itself, from my point of view, is mainly not try to be a runtime, as Dan said.
I think I agree with that. We're all circling around sort of, this would be a runtime component. It would be, sort of choosing an implementation or, some particular implementation of this idea of an Iceberg UI when there are, many other Iceberg UIs out there, right? Like you can sync into Glue and use that. I imagine Polaris and other catalogs have UI components or will. Certainly Tabular did. As well as I don't know that we actually have the expertise to maintain this. And that is probably what scares me the most, is that this is pretty outside of most of the core developers area. Building UIs, thinking about user experience, that's a very different skill set. And I think it probably makes the most sense to have third-party projects, given that there's such a clean way to connect to Iceberg. It probably makes more sense for third-party projects. But I definitely support helping people discover these projects as they come up.
So basically, we can continue developing in the current repo we have. For example, it's under IBM right now, and somehow it gets linked through the Iceberg community.
Yeah. Sorry.
Andre, sorry, I can't say your last name. Andre just made a suggestion about making one of those awesome lists. I'd be happy to build one of those out, but would we want to make that like an Apache thing, or would we want just somebody to build that? I could build it. And then we could link to that, but I'm guessing if we want to link to it from the website.
I think it's fine. I mean, the question here is, I think this goes back to sort of a number of things that we've done, which is how do we want to handle third-party content?
Yeah.
Right. I think that we in general don't want to be gatekeepers or have a decision process. So we either put everything there that gets submitted, or rely on third parties to do that curation. I would say an awesome whatever list is probably better for that sounds like curation to me. And that would probably be better done as a third party, like Brian, if you wanted to put one together. Because other things, we don't want, I think, issues in the Iceberg community where people are saying we should or should not include something, or we also don't want to be seen as endorsing other projects. This is like helping raise awareness that these projects exist, but I don't think the Iceberg community necessarily needs to endorse or recommend a particular thing, unless it's very, very obvious.
I just got a 15-minute notification thing too, so just so everybody's aware. But yeah, I'll go ahead. I mean, unless somebody else wants to raise their hand on that, I'm creating an issue right now, and if somebody else wants to do that, otherwise I'll eventually get around to it.
Thank you.
JB?
Yeah, just a small comment about that. Generally speaking, in Apache project, we don't promote any third party because else, as you said, Ryan, is all or nothing. So adding all is always very difficult. So what we do in project like Apache Camel, it's the third party can propose a pull request to update the website if they want to list themselves by their own. But the product by itself doesn't promote everything by its own. So it's up to you. I mean, I don't have a strong opinion, but generally speaking, it's I'm not a big fan of trying to list everything in a project because it's almost impossible. But my comment.
We're actually getting to a stage where I'm wondering if we should reconsider some of the other pages that we have. Just because I think, you know, like the blogs or videos pages, not everyone knows how to put things there. You know, and are we slowly drifting towards what appears to be, you know, sort of favoritism? Initially, like any Iceberg blog, all of us knew about because we were like, whoa, someone wrote a blog post on Iceberg. This is amazing. But at this point, I wonder if we're to the point where like this is not a complete list and should probably just be you know, handled elsewhere. I'll raise it on the dev list about that, because maybe we should just remove the pages.
I agree, Ryan. I mean, it's in terms of kind of neutrality, like we don't promote something on other thing. I agree with you, yeah.
Thank you for, Rakesh, I want to say, like, thank you for building this. It's really cool. It was great to see. I'll probably try it out locally. Probably not a great fit with the Iceberg project, but, you know, definitely good luck with the repository, and it's awesome to see this sort of thing popping up.
Thank you.
All right, hand it off to Dan for REST catalog testing.
Yeah, so for a while now, people have been raising questions about, as they're building out implementations of the REST catalog specification, how do they actually know that they're building it correctly, or that it's adhering to what the project kind of expects from behaviors? And a while ago, JB had mentioned that like we should probably be providing some sort of technology compatibility toolkit. So, you know, you'll see TCK mentioned a number of times. And one of the things that we actually have as part of the project is a complete set of like catalog tests that we use internally with the Java reference implementation. And then as we built the REST spec, we actually built catalog adapters that were taking that and then running those tests against local backends and internal implementations. And so I have a PR that I linked there, which is basically just extending that one step further, which is just a lightweight version of a server that runs these tests against in a local process, goes through the same set of tests. And now with this approach, like you've got like the actual in-process local tests, the catalog adapter local tests, and then you've actually got a running server implementation. The nice thing about that, though, is you can actually, just with a couple properties, repoint it to any REST server that exposes a REST protocol and run that series of tests against it as well. I think this is really helpful because then any change that we make internally kind of goes through all of those stages, and we can have good fidelity in terms of, are we testing everything consistently, and do we have standardized behavior across implementations? So take a look at it. There are some tuning parameters that we do allow just to you know, handle differences in certain aspects that we leave up to the server in terms of implementation, and we can kind of grow and extend those over time depending on like, you know, what we think is reasonable in terms of like server configurable behavior. But ultimately, this does give us like a really good jump start into some sort of standardized catalog testing, because we get 100-something tests out of the box for free. So take a look, feel free to run it. We'd like to get this initial implementation in. It's running currently with both the like local process server running as well as the internal tests, and then we can kind of adapt this over time to add new tests. And I think JB and Paco have also been talking about standing the same thing up for the other language to use as their test server, which they're currently using external one for. So take a look, provide feedback. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for making that happen. I think we all agree this is a really healthy area to get out there. So compatibility tests are really cool. All right, and we're on to the last topic. I'll hand it off to Xeon for Geo. I'm assuming
you're actually here. I just added it on because I thought he was in Italy eating pasta or something. I just wanted everyone to know that he had just sent out an email with GeoSpec details, so check out the link there if you are interested. In my 1.7 release manager hat, this is another thing that we want to get in, so I want people to look at it as soon as they can so we can move towards getting that solidified.
So I have a question on this. I looked at it at the PR briefly yesterday for the spec changes, and it looked like I was surprised because the lower bound for the geotype, basically like we would have some sort of point encoding for lower and upper bound for a geo column. Is that part? Does anyone know if that's coming from the Parquet spec or how we would derive those values? I'm somewhat concerned about just not having those values, or not being able to figure out how those values are calculated.
Yeah, so this is defined, I think, other places in the spec, but basically it's the bounding box around that set of things as if it was a planar geometry. We had a lot of discussions about this, but basically the purely numerical min-max of X and Y coordinates that are there. And the last discussion we had is all about how this is a huge problem if you are actually doing spherical coordinates, and that this does not actually apply. But we just wanted to define it concretely as just being that space of in flat Euclidean geometry. But that's it. It's always just that two-dimensional box.
I guess my concern is not like what is this encoding, but like how do we actually derive it? Because like what we're saying is, hey, we've got, well, I think the type is defined as well-known-binary, and then I guess it's a little unclear to me how we then go from a column of well-known binary to something is going to produce these values. Is that going to be in Parquet? Is that would we have a library to produce those in Iceberg? I'm just concerned about not giving guidance in the spec on how to actually derive those values.
I think this is going to be calculated in the Parquet as a status within the Parquet groups, the file level. So we will up these into the Iceberg level. But I agree with you. We probably need to clarify on the Iceberg spec that this is like derived from the extract from the Parquet stats.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we've got to solve this problem somewhere, and it does make sense to roughly have like a point or something like that. But yeah, that was just the thing that stood out to me, because rather than having sort of primitive values, we're saying now this is a compound value inside a thing, and I was like,
Yeah, I was just because you had to add a reference to the bounding box in Parquet logic type, so that's we are more clear. Okay, this is actually one of the types in Parquet, and it will calculate within Parquet and and populate into the Iceberg's stats.
Yeah, if you get a chance, see the other options that were in the spec proposal are what do they call it? A coverage geometry, where your min-max is a coverage geometry rather than just even values, and then the math on how you combine them is even more undefined.
Yeah, this stuff is hard. I'm actually asking our DO people to go take a look at this too. So, yeah. Awesome. Well, we have 4 minutes left. Any other discussion points that we weren't able to cover today? Wallet.
Hey, so there is an ongoing discussion on the materialized view state and lineage information. I think there are two alternatives, and those might benefit from another look from folks here. So discussion might be coming to a deadlock. So more voices could help move on the discussion. It's basically around like whether we should use UUIDs or table catalog identifiers to track the snapshot information in the table snapshot summary.
Sounds good.
I guess, yeah, it's a little bit like too short to kind of re-summarize that problem in the remaining 3 minutes, but this is just heads up to go over the thread, and then we can at least familiarize with the thread, and in next sync we can have a deeper discussion on this.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Is that from is this a view referencing a table or a table referencing a view?
That's the storage table referencing the children of the view. So we need their refresh snapshot IDs to be tracked in the materialized view storage table. And the key for this kind of tracking, should it be, the question is whether that key should be the catalog table identifier, like db.t, for example, or the Iceberg UUID for the table. If I recall correctly, I think in Netflix, it might have been implemented using UUID. If someone from Netflix is here, they can maybe share whether this is true.
I mean, I would probably, I'm pretty sure I would vote for table identifier, and that is probably what Netflix used, but there are no doubt arguments on both sides that we should take a look at. So yeah, and we can ping the Netflix folks and see if they have opinions about what worked well or not.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. All right. Thank you, everyone. This is going to end abruptly, so let's get out of here before Google cuts us off.